Good evening. We'll call our planning commission meeting to order.
Good evening, commissioners. I will call the roll. And I'm Joseph Linsky, stepping in for Thomas today, for those who haven't met yet. Gina Avent is absent, I believe. Mariah Bishop,
Here.
Ralph Carson,
Here.
Philip Jefferson,
Here.
Jehan Hodges,
Here.
Sherry Phillips, absent, and Michael Boylan.
Here.
All right, that is 5 members present.
Okay, thank you so much. So time for our invocation. Do I have anyone that would like to do that for us? No? I'll do that for us. Let's bow our heads. We thank you for this day that you have provided for us, the opportunity to continue to support the town of Garner. We ask that give us good knowledge and wisdom as we share information about our projects and our town's goals, and help us to work in the best interests of our township, our residents, and our community as a whole. We ask in your name. Amen. It's time for adoption of our agenda. Are there any items that you need to adjust before we adopt our agenda? No? Okay, seeing none. So we need to move to approve to adopt our agenda. Do we have a motion to adopt our agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, Mr. Boylan, do we have a second?
I second that.
Okay, Ms. Bishop, thank you so much. So we can do our roll call.
All right, there's a motion on the floor to adopt the agenda. I will call the vote. Mariah Bishop,
Aye.
Ralph Carson,
Aye.
Philip Jefferson,
Aye.
Jehan Hodges,
Aye.
and Michael Boylan.
Aye.
Thank you so much. Our meeting minutes from our meeting on October 14th is now up for review and approval. Are there any items in the minutes that need to be made aware for adjustments or changes based on your review? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve our October 14th meeting minutes?
I'll make the motion to accept the minutes
Okay,
for
thank you,
October
Mr.
14th.
Carson. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Hodges. We have a motion and a second on the floor.
All right, I'll call the vote. Mariah Bishop,
Aye.
Ralph Carson,
Aye.
Philip Jefferson,
Aye.
Jehan Hodges,
Aye.
Michael Boylan.
Aye.
All right, the minutes are adopted.
Thank you so very much. We have approved our meeting minutes. So we'll move into our regular old and new business. Our new business tonight, CZMP 2306, Pool Drive Fuel Sales. This is a Tier 2 conditional rezoning request.
All right, good evening, commissioners, members of the public. It's good to see you all this evening. My name is Erin Joseph, and I will present the case for Pool Drive Commercial and Fuel Sales, also case number CZMP 2306. So the applicant has submitted a request for a Tier 2 conditional rezoning to rezone 1.88 acres from neighborhood mixed use to commercial mixed use conditional and neighborhood mixed use conditional for the development of a convenience store with fuel sales and a retail center. The site is located within the town's corporate limits, located at 900 and 910 Pool Drive. The current zoning of the site is neighborhood mixed use NMX. It's intended for low-intensity commercial enterprises that provide goods and services primarily to residents in the surrounding area, typically found within the corporate limits where public water and sewer services are readily available. Currently, on the site, there is a convenience store with fuel sales, also known as Webb's, and the other site adjacent to the convenience store is vacant. Within the surrounding area, you have a mix of zoning districts that include R2, MFA, and NMX. The area is generally quiet and residential with convenient access to local businesses, and water and sewer are available and will connect from Pool Drive. The site falls completely within the Neighborhood Activity Center along Aversboro Road. And Aversboro Road is within, also connects the mixed-use activity center to the north in the Forest Hills area, and also another neighborhood mixed-use center or activity center to the south at Timber Drive. Aversboro Road is an NCDOT maintained road. It's classified as a secondary road. And the most recent traffic count for Aversboro Road was taken in September 2023 with an average annual daily trips at 8,590. The applicant has narrowed the possible uses to 14 out of 60 in the CMX conditional and 13 out of a possible 37 within the NMX conditional district. And the primary difference between the two districts is that within the CMX, fuel sales are allowed, whereas NMX does not allow fuel sales. They have also proffered conditions outside of the narrowed list of permitted uses. Since the public hearing was held, they have revised some of their conditions. And so you have highlighted in the red box what is new since the public hearing. And I'll briefly go through the conditions. So they have limited all buildings to 1 story. They have restricted tobacco, CBD, and vapor sales as a standalone use. And so that use will not be allowed within the NMX or the CMX district. However, tobacco sales will be allowed to continue within the existing convenience store and expansion area, but it cannot be the primary use for those locations. The owner has also proffered to limit the window signage for tobacco, CBD, and vapor products to a maximum of 5% of the total window area for that building. The owner also will install outdoor plaza with covered seating between the new retail building and Pool Drive. And they have also offered the condition to incorporate a public art element, which may include a sculpture, a building mural, fountains, decorative pavers, or artistic outdoor seating. They have also committed to installing pedestrian seating along the sidewalk connections to Pool Drive and Aversboro Road. The owner will install a painted crosswalk at the intersection of Aversboro Road and Pool Drive. They also will include building facade materials that are consistent between the two buildings, the existing building and the newly proposed building. Architectural elements shall include brick facade with aluminum storefront systems for transparency and a minimum of 2 brick colors with Soldier Bond brick course above storefronts and windows, and sections of pitched asphalt shingled roofs and metal canopies. There also will be a shared parking agreement recorded with the Wake County Register of Deeds, and this will be a parking agreement between 900 and 910 Pool Drive properties. Native plant materials will be installed And those plant materials will be of a nature that thrive locally during droughts and heavy rainfall. And they also will install a 6-foot tall black vinyl chain link fence as shown on the master plan. And so here you have their master plan, and just to highlight a few of the areas mentioned, this area here is where the outdoor plaza will be located. This building here is the new retail building that is a maximum of 5,000 square feet. You have the existing building here and the proposed extension. So between the existing building and the proposed extension, you would have a total of 4,500 square feet. Here is a proposed access, full access from Avisboro Road. Also, here is where the crosswalk would be installed and the 6-foot black vinyl fence. You have one storm control pond here on the site. And also you have plantings that front on Avisboro Road and Pool Drive. And one condition that I did not mention that is also included is the pumps are limited to 4. And so you're showing the, 2 pumps with a maximum of 8. So you have the fuel pumps here and just here. And so you would have 2, on each side, which would make it a total of 8, but 2 pumps. So again, this site is a total of 1.88 acres. Again, there is a 4,500 square feet of existing building and proposed building. And then within the NMX district of 5,000 square feet of new commercial space. 9,835 square feet of tree canopy is required. Applicant has provided 18,000 square feet of tree canopy preservation in addition to new canopy cover. Parking, they have provided 14, not including the fueling spaces, and they're required for 9 spaces. The sales and retail building would require 20, and they have provided 23. And we just made a note that other uses may require more or less, so it will be determined during zoning compliance what exactly that parking number would be. The site is located within the watershed protection area, so it is subject to water quality, nitrogen, and 85% total suspended solid treatment and other quantity requirements. Again, there's one surface stormwater control measure, and the city of Raleigh will provide water and sewer to the site. There will be 2 proposed access points, 1 proposed full access from Avisboro, and 1 shared driveway along Pool Drive. A traffic impact analysis was not required by the town of Garner or NCDOT, but the applicant has provided a trip generation letter conducted by Ramey Kemp, a traffic engineering firm. So the site was expected to generate 481 average daily trips. 23 would be inbound in the AM and 21 outbound in the outbound in the AM peak, and then 29 in the PM peak inbound and 28 in the outbound PM peak. And there were also no off-site improvements recommended. The environmental and cultural resources notes, there are existing streams with associated buffers along the western boundary of the project. And there, we have been provided by the applicant a letter from their geotechnical engineers regarding the leaking underground storage and the remediation of those tanks. So development, before redevelopment could proceed, that remediation will need to be handled. There were 352 properties that were notified for the neighborhood meeting. The first meeting was held in September of 2023, and the second meeting was held in July of this year. 12 attendees were at the first meeting and 11 at the second meeting. And you can read those details in your staff report attached to your staff report. In the context of the comprehensive land use plan, and this site is within the neighborhood activity center. It does fall within the retail area character typology, and it is a level 3 area to enhance. As this request was evaluated with consistency, there were 10 growth framework criteria that were evaluated. 9 were strongly consistent and 1 strongly inconsistent. And the lack of an identified pocket park was the inconsistency. However, the applicant has proffered a small outdoor plaza. And staff does note that there is the South Garner Park that's 0.4 miles away from the site. The land use and community character consistency, there were 17 criteria that were determined to be applicable or meaningfully to address. The consistency is modest. There are minor changes and additional details did shift the consistency due to the emphasis on the public realm, the use of open space for creating a stronger central focal point to the neighborhood, and proffering additional conditions or clarifying existing ones that speak more directly to specific recommendations of the comprehensive plan. So they were able to shift their consistency slightly. Again, always with some fine tuning in response to this evaluation and additional public input, staff expects to support an overall finding of consistency, and you do have the consistency report attached to your staff report. The public hearing was held on September 17th. I won't go through all of the items noted, but I'll just read a few. There were questions about the operational status of the fuel pumps, why a rezoning was needed. There were serious concerns regarding the remediation of the soils from the leaking fuel pumps. There were questions regarding potential use in the new retail building, the number of stores within the new building, and also about traffic concerns and comment to ensure that conditions are cleaned up regarding the vape shops and the contaminated soils. The staff has drafted a consistency statement for your review this evening. And highlighted, you have an option that indicates the results of staff's analysis, which is consistent and recommend approval. Staff has also prepared a draft motion for your consideration. The next steps in this case will be findings of consistency and recommendation to approve or deny, and back to town council for findings of reasonableness and a decision to approve or deny. And the applicant is here this evening, would like to present and answer any questions you may have. And I'll also be on standby if you have any questions for staff.
Okay. Thank you so much for that information.
Thank you.
Aaron, I have one quick question.
Yes, sir.
With regards to the applicant's amended notes, I guess, to limit window signage to 5% for vape and CBD and things like that, is that within the town guidelines? Is there a limit there on what they can advertise in the windows, and is that 5%?
No,
More or
so
less.
with signage, you can limit the amount, but not the content of signage. So that would have to be something that is voluntarily submitted. So we can only regulate the amount, the size, the color, but not actually the content of that signage.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Carson. Are there any questions specifically for staff before we?
Yeah. This is only for my own education. In the contextual setting to the south, it says single-family attached and commercial. I visited the site, and I was struck by the large lot of wooded area just to the south of where the new building would be. It's noted here as vacant. I'm just curious about it. It was a nice piece it was a nice woodlot, and I'm just curious as to how long it's sat vacant. What do we know about owner's plans or anything like that?
It's been a while since we've had an inquiry on the property. It was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. There was somebody that was potentially looking at trying to do more townhomes on the property. That ultimately didn't go anywhere at the time. We've also had some inquiries about additional office space at different points, but nothing concrete at this point. Like I say, they didn't move forward with anything at the time, but I think it is kind of ruminating out there as a possibility.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boland. Are there any other questions for staff while we're in this portion of time? But none, is the commission ready to hear from the applicant? Well, all right, well, we will hear from our applicant. Please state your name, your association, and your address. And we try to limit our presentations to about 10 minutes if you're able to. And then we will go into a question and answer session.
Okay, great. Hi, Sam Nye with the site group. My office address is 1111 Oberlin Road in Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm a civil engineer representing the owner. We did the construction plans for the project and have participated in the rezoning so far. There we go. 900 Pool Drive is currently home to an Easyway convenience store and gas station. The existing building was constructed in 1975 and previously operated under the name of K. Webb's. Both properties are currently zoned NMX. 900 Pool Drive is 0.54 acres, contains the 2,400 square foot convenience store with 2 fuel pumps. Those fuel pumps are not currently working. They've been known, it's been found out that they leak over the last, I don't know, maybe 5 or so years before my client actually bought it. So we brought a consultant that talks about how we're going to remediate that, and we're going to hear from him shortly. 910 Pool Drive is the open wooded lot, 1.34 acres. It's currently vacant. The Easyway station is situated approximately 1 mile from the BP station at US 70 and Aversboro, and then about 1 mile from the Lowe's at Timber Drive. The BP station is shown with 2 pumps. but there are two that are kind of uncovered on the side. The newer stations like the Lowe's Fuel Center are proposing 6 and 8 pumps. This owner also operates an Easy Way station that's Shell branded at 1305 Highway 70. It's further to the west on that. The applicant wishes to remove the 2 existing pumps, the canopy, and the underground tanks, and remediate the soil and the water in the area where that leak is. They would like to install 4 new pumps, new canopies, new underground tanks. During the site plan process, we were informed we could not expand the fuel pumps without requesting a rezoning, CMX. The owner would also like to expand the existing convenience store by 2,100 square feet. That would allow them room for a kitchen, to have food where you prepare it for sale, like a pizza place or a sub shop inside the convenience store. Right now, it's a pretty small store, and they don't have room for that. That extra area would also help with shelving for selling merchandise. To fit the pumps and the expansion, we need to move the property line, kind of the way that these 2 properties are. It was ideal to run the property line down the center of the access drive between the 2. So we're proposing to relocate that property line. We're requesting CMX conditional use to allow the fuel pumps to be expanded. We're severely limiting the uses that we're asking for in CMX, because we want NMX, but just to be able to have a more modern fuel center that has more than 2 pumps. It's hard to compete for fuel sales if you have 2 pumps. It's in the 70s that worked great. There are more people here now, and 4 pumps is a lot easier to get a branded store in to help. And then, so we're including the lot next door and adding conditions to that NMX zoning, just to try to make the expansion of the fuel sales more palatable to, the town and the neighbors and everyone. So the underground storage tanks have been, actually, well before I got involved with this project, Mr. Shetty has been working. He worked with the previous owner on this project, and he's working with the new one. And if it's okay, I'd like to have him come up and just talk about the tanks, because that was a big question last time, and I kind of knew it, but he knows it exactly. So.
Okay. Thank you. Please make sure you state your name and your association and address.
Good evening. My name is Rohit Shetty. I'm with Geological Resources, Inc. in Charlotte, North Carolina. The address is 3502 Hayes Road in Monroe, North Carolina. And as Sam was mentioning, I've been involved with this particular site since 2020, when we represented the previous owner of the tanks. And as part of their environmental due diligence, they hired us to do a phase 1 and phase 2 environmental site assessment, where we collected some groundwater samples, and that's when we detected that there was some contamination. And with the previous owner's permission, and as required by North Carolina DEQ's regulations, we had to report that that there was a potential petroleum release at the site. And so then North Carolina DEQ, that's Department of Environmental Quality, their underground storage tank division pretty much directs all assessment and remediation of underground storage tank sites, any convenience stores or bulk plants. And once the release notification was submitted to DEQ, then they directed a series of site assessments, where we since 2020 we collected several soil samples in and around the tank basin. So there are 2 tank basins, so we collected soil samples, groundwater samples, and the whole idea of the assessment is to find out where exactly is is the contamination. So what we were able to identify was that it was a combination of the underground storage tanks, potentially the product piping that runs from the tanks to the pumps, and then in and around the pumps. And it's very, it does happen a lot, because the tanks age over time. Usually you have leaks kind of, around the connectors of the piping. So we don't know exactly where the release occurred, but our soil sampling and groundwater sampling actually gave us evidence that there was a petroleum release. And North Carolina, like several other states in the U.S., come under a federal, what it's called is a risk-based corrective action. And what that means is that for each site is evaluated as a low risk, intermediate risk, or high risk based on the potential of the petroleum release to affect drinking water and neighborhoods and things like that. And so we did what was called a receptor survey back in 2021 as part of the directed work from NCDEQ. And so there were no private water supply wells, no drinking water supply wells within a 1,500-foot radius. And the 1,500-foot radius from the site is really the criteria that DEQ looks at. And so there were no private water supply wells. There was a surface water body about 500 feet from the site. And so what the state does is the regulations, they look at the contaminant concentrations in groundwater, and then they look at potential receptors. And then based on the levels of contamination and the distance of the receptors, then they say, okay, the site is low risk, intermediate risk, or high risk. And based on the risk criteria, there are cleanup levels associated with that. And so as part of the assessment, we had to install additional monitoring wells and collect additional soil samples to define, where exactly is the contamination and is the plume stable. So we've done all of that. And where we are right now is so the site was actually ranked as an intermediate risk site. If it is high risk, then you have to clean up the site to drinking water standards. So intermediate risk basically means that there were no private water supply wells, so nobody could actually drink the water, install a drinking water well and potentially have exposure. So the site is intermediate risk, and the goals for cleanup is to be protective of the surface water body, which is about 500 feet down gradient. And so the state actually has cleanup levels, and we have to make sure that our cleanup is 10 times the surface water standard for the petroleum constituents. And where we are right now is that once this project gets approved, regardless of whether how the project is moving along, the site is under the UST program's trust fund program, where the state is directing work to be continued. So we're doing ongoing, recovery of contaminated water to lower the contaminant concentrations to meet the cleanup standard. So that's going on as it is. And so while this project was presented, there's a great opportunity where the applicant is looking to remove the old tanks, and that's really the best time to go in. And as we remove the tanks, it'll expose the contaminated soil, any contaminated groundwater. So we go in there, we have a mobile lab that my company owns, and we collect soil samples in real time to say, okay, this is the extent of where the soil contamination is, and we have a vacuum truck. So as any water seeps into the excavation area, we pump that water out. And then the plan is that we are also looking at, going to do a couple of feasibility studies to see what kind of remediation product we can mix in with the clean backfill that goes into the old tank basin. So what will happen is that once the soil is covered up, the product that is in the ground is going to keep, as it keeps continuing to get wet and in contact with any of the contaminated water, it will keep cleaning up. And the process it's called in situ chemical oxidation. And it's a very natural process. What it does is it uses the naturally occurring microbes and bacteria in the ground, which use the petroleum as a food source. So they feed on the petroleum, and all the chemical oxidants do is basically oxygenate the area. So it provides more oxygen for the microbes population to grow, so that they can use the petroleum as a food source. So that's one of the cleanup technologies we are planning to use, and there's no byproduct which is harmful or anything, because it's just carbon dioxide and water is the end result. So that's one of the leading technologies now, and we've done a lot of those cleanups at other sites, and it's approved by the state. And so what we thought is that if we go out when the client is planning to remove the old tanks, that would be the best time to go in and actually see where the contamination is and address it. So when the tank so that's basically the strategy. And so we work very closely with NCDEQ to make sure that we satisfy the state's guidelines. And also, as a licensed engineer, it is my responsibility also to make sure that it's protective of the human health and environment. So that's really the kind of in a nutshell what we plan to do. And if you all have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions at the moment?
I've got a fefew questions. The contamination of this site concerns me. Now, you stated, that Mr. Nye had a slide that said proximity to other stations, and this site had 4 pumps, but he said 2 were there now, but they're not operational. So that slide is really not accurate. That's, if the application goes through and the rezoning, you would have 4 pumps there. But in reading this report, you've got 10 times over the level 2B requirements. You've got free product flowing that's just a mere inches below the surface. That property, as I recall, sits up a little bit higher. How are they going to do, and you talk about in situ, and I'm familiar with remediation.
Right.
I used to be involved with that, but you talk about in situ, why not just remove the soil,
And
contaminated soil, take it off site, treat it off site, and have a clean site? You talk about the plume, and you've done 2 studies, but you also mentioned you don't know where the plume is or if it's still moving. You wanted to determine if it's stable or not. So has product left the premises?
No, so all very good questions. And so the assessment that we did, it's called a comprehensive site assessment. Mm-hmm. So that basically allows us to define the extent of the plume, and so that has been defined. So we know where the contamination is on site, which is really around the existing tank basin, the product lines, and the dispensers, and it's really 4 monitoring wells that currently exceed the 10 times 2B standard. The soils that we collected, a series of soil samples that we collected over the past since 2020, they're all below the residential soil cleanup levels. So it's just the groundwater that we need to clean up. And you're right that the best way to clean up is to dig up whatever contaminated soil we encounter when we pull the tanks. And that's definitely part of that. That is a primary part of the treatment. The in situ chemical oxidation is more like an insurance step that, because we have a limited footprint where we can dig, in and around the tank basin. That's what the state would allow us. They won't let us dig the entire property up, but we will focus on the areas where, the contamination exceeds the cleanup standards. And the primary focus will be to get rid of the contaminated soil and any contaminated water that comes in. So we'll pump that out, and then as an insurance step is where we put in the in situ chemical oxidant. So once the backfill, everything is there, because if there is any groundwater flows from high to low. So if there are certain areas that were not targeted in the cleanup, the chemical oxidant will work to clean up everything else. So it's a 2-pronged strategy. And we're also continually right now, we are pumping out, we are doing a sequence of groundwater extraction events. And so the last one that was completed was back in September. And so there is no free product on site, and there's only dissolve phase right now.
So my other concern is you're gonna remove some soils, you're gonna in situ treat some other soils. But you're also, after that's done, if I understand it correctly, you're then gonna go in and start digging foundations and footings and digging a wet pond in a site that is still potentially contaminated. And that wet pond is gonna drain somewhere.
So from what I saw in the plans, the pond is actually going to be kind of in that currently vacant area. So to the west. So based on our site assessment done so far, we already have the external edge of the plume defined, and it's well within the current gas station property. So we've got monitoring wells on site which are clean. So the pond is further to the west of where the contamination is. So the contaminant plume is defined on site. So there's no outer edge of the plume that has migrated off site.
So you have, if I understand it correctly, you have contaminated groundwater.
Right.
But your monitoring wells are showing 0.
The outer edge, yes.
Okay, so as you get closer to the existing USTs, you're gonna get higher concentrations.
Correct.
The site
And
plan,
also the pond too. Typically, when you do these surface water ponds, they will be, maybe 5 feet or 10 feet deep. The depth to groundwater here is much deeper than that. So whatever water you'll see would be like, rainwater that would come and would ultimately populate that pond. So there may be some groundwater interaction, but it's typically these ponds are the surface water ponds are not very deep. It's more to, collect any stormwater runoff that comes from the parking lot and everything and collects into that. So typically these ponds would not intersect the water table.
in your site plan that you provided for us, you're showing a heavy dash line, curve line. I'm assuming that is where those plume areas are suggested that they are not expanded. Is that it?
No, so
I actually have never shown a plume area. We didn't. Do you know where that is?
yeah, I can maybe just if there's a pointer, I could maybe just circle. Yeah.
I know that y'all might not be able to.
So I can show on both sides actually. Just for this side.
It's that red button.
Oh, the red one. Okay. There. Okay. So there are tanks currently. There are 2 tanks here and 1 tank here, and the dispensers kind of run like this over here. So we have monitoring wells over here, which are clean, and most of the contamination is like in and around that area. So around the tank basin, around this tank, and so to the west of the current dispenser islands, we've got like about 3 monitoring wells. So we've got 2 monitoring wells here and 1 to the south here, which are all clean. Were you able to see
Yeah, I
the
can
dust?
see
Okay.
it.
So really the plume is kind of in and around here. It's not a very big plume.
So in the southeast corner.
Yeah, so it's kind of here, and so the pond is down here. So we actually have monitoring wells here which are clean to show the outer edge of the plume. That basically says that okay, this is everything to the east of that is where everything to the east of that is where there is contamination, but to the west of those wells, it's clean.
Okay.
I have a question. I'm not sure who to direct it to, but I think it's Mr. Nye. And maybe it's the owner here. Would there be consideration to table this rezoning until the environmental assessments, remediation plans, removal of all the contaminated soils is completed? Like, I guess my thought process is you're asking for the rezoning, but all this stuff has to be done first. So would it be better position for the town to table this application and do all this work that you say you're gonna do and get everything clean first and then look at the rezoning? And that's a question, like I said, I don't know if that's for you or the owner.
Right. Well, I mean, I think I can speak to that. It's very costly to shut down the store and dig up all the old tanks and dig up the piping, take out the canopy, and what they want to do is do all of that work at the same time that they are doing the construction of the additional building, the expansion of the building, installing the new tanks. I mean, it doesn't make sense for them to start construction twice and to shut down their store twice. I mean, it would just take twice as long to do that. And I don't think that, unless it doesn't seem like it would be the right way for them to go about it, right? Take a long time.
So you're proposing to start construction in some fashion simultaneously to doing all of the remediation, which is,
Well,
I thought I read somewhere that the remediation was gonna be done first in one of the conditions that that Aaron had presented with the town.
So the contaminants, I mean, they're going to have to shut down the store to dig the whole parking lot up and take all of that soil out and be in there and testing it. And there's, I don't know how long exactly that takes to do, but that will be step one for the project, right? But then to wait on a decision on, are we putting in two pumps or 4 pumps, is a really long process. It doesn't seem fair to have to do. I mean, we're almost 2 years into a site plan here, so.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Mr. Boylan, do you have any questions?
No.
Ms. Bishop?
Do you want me to finish my
Yeah, I was gonna
presentation?
say, you wanna finish?
Yeah.
Okay.
understood.
Thank you. So this is the general layout of the property, the existing building, kind of stuff we've already been talking about. I would like to point out that the property to the west does not require a rezoning and could be built, by right without coming to council or planning commission and asking for anything. It's just, we're including that to try to get it so we can have 4 pumps at the site and try to make it more palatable for everyone else. Slide shows a breakdown for the nerds in the room that like to think about the exact square footage, exact area, the building setbacks, the current uses, the proposed uses. The parking was a big issue when we were going through our neighborhood meetings about how many spaces we're providing. We're 4 over on the fuel center and 3 over on the retail. And then we're agreeing to share parking. So different uses, say if you've got a sub shop that's really popular at lunch and some other place that's more popular at dinner, sharing that parking can help, keep everybody, making sure they have a good parking spot. We've limited the uses we talked about. Basically limited the CMX uses to NMX. What you could have in NMX, with the exception of the fuel pumps. Limiting the number of pumps to 4. Right. So right now there are 2. And I think by right, we would be allowed to rebuild those 2 because they're existing non-conforming and we're maintaining them. So I think our rezoning ask is, can we have 4 pumps instead of 2 is where we're at. Limiting to 1 story for the building. This one was the tobacco, CBD, and vapor shop was a big question last time, and we wanted to try to clarify it. Worked very closely with staff, and they helped us to try to define what are we talking about. And then it's a gas station, so people that smoke shop there, and they buy those types of products. So we wanted to distinguish between a primary use, so like a vape or a CBD shop, not allowed. For them in the convenience store selling tobacco, they want to be able to continue to do that. They can't really compete with other fueling stations if they don't. And then some of the other stuff we talked about the window area for the advertising, the outdoor amenity area. That was one thing that we met a neighbor that came out after our last meeting, and she was really kind of against the project, and then she was for it because she realized that this is kind of a community gathering area. So we'll get into that a little bit. This is just the rendered site plan. So this space, I wish she was here tonight, but she's not. We talked about how one of their other fueling centers, they have a food truck and people get together there, and it's kind of a place for them to gather, the one on US 70. And this store historically was that, and then it's kind of honestly it's a little bit run down now, and it's a little bit less of a community gathering space. And this part of this project is to try to build that back. So there's not a ton of area dedicated to it, but they've committed to a patio, and then some sort of art on that patio or on the wall behind it. Some of the stuff's probably too big for what we're looking at, and we don't want to do a mural if the town thinks that's a terrible idea or is going to look bad. But some sort of public art that would make that space for the people that live around there that frequent it regularly, a place to hang out. And I know there's a lot of activities for kids and soccer and stuff right down the road, and that was one of the things that the lady mentioned, was that group needs somewhere to eat that's close by. And so we're kind of trying to provide that and give a space for people to go get some food without getting back out on Aversboro, and then get back to the softball field or the soccer field. These are our architectural elevations. We went through them at the last meeting. We're trying to give a little bit to some of the residential that's there, and then also mimic some of the commercial that's kind of catty corner across the street. Like on the southeast corner of Aversboro and Pool Drive, there's a office park that's Zone CMX that has similar architecture, so we tried to borrow from that. And this is the existing convenience store, and then kind of the addition to the left. And this is the new retail building. We're not sure exactly how many individual users would be in there, if it would be 3, if it would be 5. So those storefronts may shift one side or the other. So we, through 2 neighborhood meetings, we've gone through the site plan and the construction drawing process for this site, kind of not knowing that we needed a rezoning to start with. This owner has made a lot of efforts to make this acceptable to the neighbors and to y'all and to the council as well. And we feel like expanding the pumps is necessary to revitalize and modernize the station. We've made multiple concessions and commitments, starting with DOT. The driveway that's on Aversboro Road right now has a bunch of head-in parking spaces along it. DOT said that's not safe, so we said we'll get rid of those. Move the existing driveway for the station 110 feet away from the intersection to make it easier for cars to get out and get onto Pool Drive. For the town, we added the plaza, the public art, the pedestrian connections, the seating along the pedestrian connections, the bike parking. We have 21% tree cover, sidewalk along Pool Drive. For the neighbors, we added 3 parking spaces, the cross parking agreement. We added a fountain to the wet pond. included a fence along the western property line because some people were cutting through the kind of walking across the neighbor's property. Limited the uses, and our big goal that we want and kind of need for this project is the 4 pumps. So that's what we're here to ask for. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Boland?
Yeah, regarding the reports from the neighborhood meetings, I want to compliment you. This is one of the clearer reports on the neighborhood meetings that we have received. The questions were articulated from the attendees well, and the answers were answered well, not in code. So I just wanted to compliment you on this. It was really interesting reading the questions that the neighbors had and the answers you had. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes, so several things. So I really like the convenience store, near the houses. I think that's nice. And then the pedestrian walkway, I think that's definitely nice. My biggest concern, kind of echoing what Mr. Carson was saying, is the contamination. So with the soil, as well as I guess any type of air pollution, especially since there's homes nearby. And I know a lot of times gas stations can emit different chemicals in the air, which is sometimes not great to breathe in. And I see that there's a lot of residents in that area. So that's my biggest concern there. And approximately, do we know how long the prior fuel pumps weren't working?
So they were. So this was somewhere around 2020, 2021 was when the previous owner decided to, because they had to do some repairs, and they figured out pretty quickly that, the way North Carolina DEQ's regulations are is that if you've got an older tank system and if you do a spot repair of a section of it, then the entire UST system, the tanks, the piping, everything has to be upgraded to the new standard. And so because they didn't know exactly what they had to do, they decided, let's just stop, selling fuel. So what they did was they applied for a temporary closure of the tank. So what that requires is that the fuel has to be pumped out. So they sold as much as they could, but then the tanks have to be pumped out. And they just leave the bare minimum, like liquid in the tanks, just so that they can keep up with the annual testing that is required to maintain the permit. But currently there shouldn't be any fuel in the tanks or in the product piping or any of that. And so I think the tanks have been in temporary closure for about 2 to 3 years at least, probably from 2021.
Okay, thank you. And so, I'm just trying to understand also this sidewalk. So does that sidewalk connect to the neighborhoods? Is that what you're saying, or is it not quite connecting?
I'm trying to remember. That sidewalk so there is a sidewalk already along Aversburg in the north-south direction, and the sidewalk in the east-west is new. I just can't recall if that, I don't think it is. I think we're just building it to our property line and stopping, to our property frontage.
Okay. Is there any potential way to have it connect all the way down so the residents can safely walk?
Do you know? I don't know how far that is, but
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
it's a point to consider, and I think it would just depend on how far it is, but and what the status of that side is. Sometimes there's a nice shoulder built, and building a sidewalk is super easy, and then sometimes it's like a hillside, and you were committing to something that would be terribly difficult to do. It's something that we can, as a group, look at and bring you and bring the next group.
Because it would also, benefit the
Yeah.
store as well, because I'm sure people will feel safer, for the residents, and they can grab a quick bite to eat or things like that.
Because I think the closer you can get people down to the ball fields down there, there's a lot of customers, right?
Yeah,
That-
yeah.
that-
There is sidewalk on the south side of Pool Drive. There is no sidewalk anywhere on the north side of Pool Drive currently. That stems from our previous UDOs several iterations ago, where on local residential streets, sidewalks were only required on one side. So the two sides was a relatively recent addition to the UDO. So we do require folks to upgrade as those times become available. But to be quite honest, they'd have to extend it all the way down the rest of Pool Drive for it to actually serve anything. So it's not like there's anywhere nearby within just, a few hundred feet that it might connect to. So folks would need to take the southern side and then make a crossing at probably up at Aversboro. But most people, as we know, are going to take the shortest
And is,
route.
and at Avisboro, is there a pedestrian crosswalk or any type of flashing? for
Not
pedestrians?
across Pool that I'm aware of.
Across Pool, we are proposing to install a striped crosswalk, but not it's a stop condition. So, crosswalk, stop bar, and a stop sign. So we're proposing to stripe it, but not to have a push button that would, it's a stop condition now. And I wouldn't want to give people turning off of Aversboro probably wouldn't respect a flashing crosswalk that close. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Yeah. Might be something to make a suggestion to prioritize for the town in the future.
Yeah. And then the last thing is there any, consideration as to potentially just doing the convenience store without the fuel sales, or just because of my biggest concern is the environmental impact and the health impact on the residents there?
I think that would be a challenge for them financially to, right now it doesn't have fuel sales, but it's not really performing to the level that they want it to. 2 pumps is a lot harder to be competitive in the is it gonna be Shell, or is it gonna be BP, or who's gonna be the provider? But that we came asking, we really need the 4 pumps and want them, but and I think a lot of the retail and food stuff, that's part of that secondary building. What's interesting about 910 is that there's a Raleigh raw water line easement that runs kind of 45 degrees through that site. So that's why our parking turns and runs up and down that. There is no water line. There's no water line in the easement. It's just a future easement. I don't think when I talked to Raleigh Water, they said that they don't plan to build it ever, but they don't plan to get rid of the easement either. So it's, it would be a good place to have a water line easement someday, but the intent for having that easement, there's no pipe in the ground, and there's no imminent plan to do anything with it. Did I answer your question?
Yes,
I get
sir.
lost
Yes.
rambling.
Thank
So-
you. Yeah.
I would be remiss because I forgot this. This is a petition that we put out at the store, and I forgot to mention it. There are 21 pages of signatures for people that came into the store and signed that they would like the fuel pumps to be expanded and they, for this rezoning to be approved. I don't know if I'm allowed to pass these out. There's 315 signatures on them, so I don't want to forget those people.
Ms. Hodges?
Yeah, I have a couple questions, hopefully quick. I would assume that from the time that those tanks were initially placed to where we are now, that we've come quite a way in being able to technology. I mean, the tanks are built better. The risk of contamination is less. I would assume that's pretty sound statement.
Yes.
Okay.
So the tanks, the piping, the new safety requirements require everything to be double walled with like a dynamic leak detection system. So previously used to just have like a single wall pipe running from the tank to the pumps, and if there was a spill, you wouldn't know it until you actually drilled or something around there. Now you've got this continuous monitoring and a leak detection system. So anytime there's a change in pressure, alarms will go off.
Okay, that was,
And it
you
would all
answered
be
my.
self-contained.
Perfect. Yeah, you answered my second question, which was going to be how we would detect contamination at this point. So it's like you said, it has automatic sensors to notify.
And I think that's one of the things when they go in with the new system, you're going to have all the safeguards of new technology that would be out
Yeah.
there. So
Okay.
it would definitely be a huge benefit.
On a positive note, I think for what probably most people would think of a gas station or convenience store, what you've done to accommodate for the neighborhood in the area, I think is great. The fencing, really listening to what the public shared and trying to meet people halfway at least, and can have possible potential for, like you said, restaurant or some kind of food service there, and also being able to, even though there's sidewalks and not on that side of the street, there's still a sidewalk that runs along there. So being convenient for people, and then for people who are rushing to work in the morning, have another option for gas without having to worry about, trying to make another exit or pull off too. So, but I think I do like a lot of the things that you've added to it to try to make it more palatable for a neighborhood type structure. So.
Thank you.
All right, thanks. I just have a couple things, questions. On the west side of the site, along the new fence line, and probably also on the north side, are you planning also to plant within that buffer along that fence line, or is it just open site and then fence? Only because it would soften the edge with the existing residential
So
DC.
there is there's that Neuse River buffer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like our property line is very close to the center of that stream,
Yep.
right? So then we've got that 50-foot buffer that we're not really touching. It's wooded now. We're going to leave it wooded. And then we are going to clear the trees and build the site. Build the site, get the building up, put the fence in, and then there's landscaping along the periphery of the building and the west side of the pond, and on the people's, like the people that are in this facility side of that fence. And on the other side of that fence, there's that 50-foot buffer down to the creek, and then the creek and whatever's happening on the other side. I think there's a buffer there as well, but it's I think some of that neighborhood was built kind of before they did the buffer rules so much, so it's a little bit less, but there'll still be at least that 50 feet of woods, then the fence, and then some planted landscaping between the fence and our parking or our building.
Okay, but not along the east side of the fence. is what I'm asking.
Yes, sir.
So
The other side, along the
On the
buffer
building
side.
side.
Yeah.
Okay, so then that side so that space in between becomes
Planted.
low-lying planting, shrubs or
I wish my eyes were better.
the
There's,
only- yeah.
there's some understory trees and some shrubs, and then probably mulch under there.
So you're going to try and keep as much that exists there, is what you're saying, and then plant under the understory where you can.
Right.
Okay, along that fence line, and then you have new planting and landscape along the building edge.
And in the parking lot.
And in
Yeah.
the parking
And
lot.
those are kind of like the vehicle use area planting.
Okay. Only reason I bring that up is because if that's like, somehow open or not really defined, then it becomes this nebulous area where people just
Yeah.
wander.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things that you design it purposefully so that it is on purpose, a space that is either used or it's a space that is not used because it's planted. That's the only thing. Because I know I had some of the comments from the neighbors about noise, more than likely from from Abrasboro, the bar, more than likely. But when you talk about a plaza on the south side, I wonder if that's a plaza, then does that west side also become usable as open space if it was open? So that's why I want to make sure that it's very clear how you define that buffer.
Okay.
And then also on the question from Ms. Bishop about carbon dioxide and emissions from cars, the more planting, the more trees that we have on the site, the more carbon dioxide is being removed from the atmosphere. And so that's why I want to ask that question. I want to appreciate the need or desire to really regenerate this neighborhood center of an area. And I appreciate also the fact that you are trying to maintain a proportion, one-story component that fits with the context of the western part of Abrasboro, not the eastern side, which does have stories, right? I would, as much as you can, match kind of profile of residential roof line and slope to make it feel like it really is this neighborhood center. I would, just kind of think about, I know that when we build a building that's a retail, it's usually a box with a roof on the front. So if there was a way to really soften those edges, I think it would feel like it's more part of the neighborhood. And then, what is backside, what is front side? On that southwestern side of the new building, it's all backside. Probably no windows. I'm not sure. I don't remember seeing the
I don't want
elevation.
to look because we went back and forth on that. So
this is the backside that we see the retail south elevation. Okay, so there's some
Yeah,
windows or some.
and I think those are primarily kind of, they're the ones that you can see through, but not all the way through. It's at least a three-sided retail, right? That backside that backs up to the woods probably isn't going to have a lot of action, but it actually has the same. We're trying to have some glazing on all sides and not have it be just a blank bare back wall.
That would, that is facing the street to a degree. So
Yeah.
there's a sidewalk that you're also showing. So no, you're not. I mean, that's, as people see that
Yeah.
and they walk along that, I don't know, perhaps the wet detention becomes more of an amenity as you move along that edge or not. Those are just some things to think about. This is an existing retail space that has existing tanks. So my question, if the tanks remain and nothing else happened to this site currently, what's the deterioration of those tanks and the current leaking of petroleum into the...
So typically, if the American Steel Tank Institute has a life for these tanks, and they say once they pass the 20-year mark, that's when your deterioration kind of really begins. So right now, because the previous owner found that there was a problem, they decided, let's not continue, selling fuel, because they have certain testing requirements that if it passes those, like leak tests and everything, if it passes those tests, they can continue to sell fuel according to the state. But I think the previous owner was also like a little bit more proactive, and they were very scared. They were, well, we found that there is a problem. Let's not add to it. So they instantly decided that, let's not, sell any fuel until we remove these tanks and, address this. And that's really the best time to, because, we could we could drill a lot of holes and spend a lot of money trying to, clean it up. But when the tanks are removed, that's the best access to the source area where you can remove the bulk of the contaminant mass, and then that over time petroleum contamination does degrade naturally, but when you remove the source area, that's the fastest way you can clean it up. And then what we were thinking of was removing the source area and then augmenting it with some naturally chemical oxidants which would oxygenate the area, so the plume would shrink anyway. But that natural attenuation process can be slower. But when you remove the source area, when we remove the tanks, that would be the best way to really address any of the contamination.
Okay. Are there any?
I have one quick question just to make sure for my clarity. The internet gambling type businesses, does that fall under anything that's under this permitted use that I'm just not aware of? Can it?
Is that a use in?
Like, does it fall under?
I don't know
any
what that
of-
is exactly.
Does it happen to fall under
you
any
know
of
what that
these permitted uses, or is that a separate type, like a sweepstakes type place? Does that, can that fall under anything that is listed here that's permitted?
Sweepstakes are specifically called out. Just a second.
I just wanted to make sure it couldn't fall under like the sales or, I don't know, something that,
Yes, I believe we have those listed as a distinct
Okay.
separate use. Perfect. But I will verify that.
as long as that's the case, then.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions for the applicant? Well, Mr. Treason, all right. he's,
Yes, electronic gaming centers are a separate use. They are special use permit required in CMX and AC districts.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. I want to make sure I open this up to the public. If there are any responses for or against, this is the time for us to have that conversation. Okay. Please come forward, state your name and your address for our record.
Good evening, Chairman Jefferson and Commission members. It's quite an exciting time to be living here in Garner. My name is Lee West, and I reside at 351 Bailey Court in the River Birch Towns community, directly across Aversboro Road from 900 Pool Drive. Last Thursday afternoon, I sent an email to the committee that included 2 attachments. I think Mr. Triesenberg forwarded that email to everyone. One attachment contained a transcript of comments I made to the town council on September 17th of this year. The issues presented in the transcript are still valid and have not been addressed. The other attachment was a copy of a May 25th, 2021 letter from the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, Division of Waste Management, to the former owners of 900 Pool Drive. I'd like to read a portion of that letter for the public record. Quote, "A release was confirmed when water samples obtained during a Phase 2 environmental site assessment on September 24, 2020, indicated the presence of petroleum hydrocarbon constituents exceeding the 2L North Carolina groundwater quality standards in temporary monitoring wells TW1 through TW5. Furthermore, concentrations of benzene exceeded the NCDEQ gross contamination levels in groundwater samples collected from TW2 and TW5. The release was reported to the Raleigh Regional Office on October 14th, 2020, by submittal of UST-61 form. Incident number 47430 was assigned. The tanks had been upgraded to meet the required federal corrosion protection, leak detection, and spill overfill prevention standards at the time of the release discovery, end quote. A short time later on Thursday, I received from the Planning Department a copy of an October 24, 2024 letter from Geological Resources, Inc. to the current owners of 900 Pool Drive. This letter presented an assessment of various testing activities at 900 Pool Drive from September 2020 until November 1, 2022. The letter further stated that all test results during this time period confirmed the presence of one or more petroleum constituent concentrations of greater than 10 times the 2B standards. Geological Resources concluded that the site risk was intermediate and suggested a feasibility study to evaluate remedial options. Until this evening, it was unknown if the owners have a plan for remediation other than replacing the underground fuel storage tanks if the site is rezoned for fuel sales. While the risk may be deemed intermediate by Geological Resources, I suggest that the health risk to residents is severe. Benzene and petroleum hydrocarbons are proven carcinogens. Groundwater contamination is a serious matter, and I suggest that remediation be swift and complete. Therefore, in conclusion, I request that the Planning Commission defer any action on the rezoning request for 900 Pool Drive until there is irrefutable proof that the contaminated soil at the site has been removed and certified safe by the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you so much. Okay, is there any others for or against that was, just to make it clear, this is a statement against, against. Is there any statements for? We need to hear. Okay, none, being none. So we're at a time to make some further decisions. So in order for the Planning Commission to make further statement, is there a motion on the floor in either direction?
I've got a couple more questions.
You have a couple more questions?
Yeah, just
Okay.
So, and I guess I'll direct this to Mr. Shetty first. Will NCDWQ be doing simultaneous inspections during the remediation process, or will you just submit a summary report of the findings when everything's all done?
So DEQ's requirements are that before we, like let's say if you're doing the removing the tanks, we have to notify them, 30 days in advance when we plan to remove the tanks, and then we also notify them 48 hours prior to, so their inspector can be on site. And typically when we are removing the tanks, the fire marshal, everyone is there to make sure that the tanks are removed in accordance with the regulations. And even when we collect any samples or submit the report, a licensed engineer like myself or a professional geologist has to stamp that this work was done in accordance with the state's environmental requirements, and that everything is being done that's protective of human health and the environment. So when we stamp these reports, we are actually standing behind the work, the assessment and remediation work that was done. So
Okay. I just have one final question, because the contamination on this site concerns me, and digging there, building new buildings. But I guess this question be perhaps from Mr. Nye. Will the remediation of this site occur no matter what the pending rezoning application before the commission is tonight? So if we approve it, I guess the remediation occurs. If we do not approve it, will it still occur if we table it? will it still occur or not occur?
So the assessment and remediation now, once a petroleum release was identified, now it's in the hands of North Carolina DEQ. So until we meet the cleanup standards, assessment phase is pretty much almost completed because the plume has been defined. Now we are looking at the cleanup phase. So regardless, we have to clean the site up to meet the state's requirements. The only caveat is that if we are removing the tanks, it makes it a whole lot faster to get to the contamination, and the cleanup process is also much faster. And even one other point I wanted to mention is that the risk ranking of the site from high risk, intermediate risk, low risk, it's a federal EPA mandated standard which North Carolina DEQ has applied to all the sites over here. So it's not something that my company has said, well, this is an intermediate risk. This is the state and federal standard according to the risk-based cleanup criteria. So that just wanted to point that out too.
So I'll ask a follow-up question of Mr. West, because there's some other people in the neighborhood meetings that had the same questions. Mr. West, if the commission considers this application, let's say we approve it this evening, and the applicant must clean up the site and meet, well, you said DEQ, but DEQ guidelines, does that satisfy your concerns and the neighbors' concerns that the site has been cleaned up?
As far as the cleanup, yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And just for the
Oh, so the way you stopped there, so is there another concern?
Yes, as far as the rezoning to permit fuel sales,
Okay,
our community.
okay, thank you.
just for the benefit of the commission members, our final approval at a staff level going forward is always contingent upon the applicant's completion of other state, federal, local agency permitting requirements. So we also would withhold for the existing site, not the new site, but the existing site until confirmation that the state permit requirements have been met.
How long has this site been an active store, I guess, for lack of a better word, but dispensing fuel with fuel pumps? I mean, they talk about 2020, but does this go back 20, 30 years? Has this site been active in selling fuel?
Oh yeah, I mean I don't know exactly when they stopped selling, but I've gassed up there since I've been employed here.
Yeah, I have too. Okay.
That's all the questions I have.
All right. Are there any other questions before we? Okay, so that we can have a final discussion, is there a motion on the floor from the commission?
Yeah, I will move that the Planning Commission accept the consistency statement drafted herein as our own written recommendation regarding the consistency of the request with the town's adopted land use plans, and recommend approval of case number CZMP 2306 to Town Council.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Volan. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. So is there any other discussion within the commission about anything positive, negative? I will say that the sooner work can be done to clean up this site for future use would be anything positive, I think, to me and for the neighbors of that site. So I appreciate the desire to try and do that. It has been an existing site for fuel sales, and this hopefully will upgrade it to a better way for the neighborhood to be able to use. It meets our guidelines of our comprehensive plan. And it's helpful to see that you're trying to meet that as best as you can to protect the residents.
I think there's a lot of positives as far as upgrading the site and the new building. I'm listening to the concerns, both written and Mr. West's concerns. And this is a tough one for myself. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Okay, well, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Okay, well, we are ready to vote.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. I'll call the vote. Mariah Bishop. Ralph.
Still thinking, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just to echo what he said, this is a tough one. I would say aye, as long as everything is cleaned up properly.
Ralph Carson.
Nay.
Philip Jefferson.
Aye.
Jehan Hodges.
Aye.
Michael Voiland.
Aye.
There are 4 ayes and 1 nay. The motion passes.
Okay, we have a passed motion. Thank you so much, Commission. Thank you for our guests. You are welcome to stay, but you do not have to. So we will now move to our reports from the Planning Director, Mr. Triesenberg.
Yes. In terms of activity at the council since your last meeting, at the meeting of October 22nd, we processed an annexation for the Auburn Station community. For those of you who may not be familiar with that, that is a new development right at the northwest corner of Auburn Knightdale Road and East Garner Road. That's being done by Tall Brothers. Will be a senior 55 plus restricted community. They are moving right along, so that now has been annexed into the town's corporate limits. At that meeting, the Tier 2 rezoning was also approved for Homestead at Bryan Farm. At the meeting on, and I believe that vote was 3-2. At the meeting of November 4th, there were some additional annexation and zoning approvals. The Gateway 540 project, which was a Tier 1 rezoning request, centered on kind of the employment park there at the southeast corner of 50 and 540 interchange. That was approved along with the decision to annex the property. We had to annex it first in order to establish zoning because that site is currently outside our ETJ. Also, the emergency fire-only access into the 401 Exchange project down behind the Brookwood community. That little parcel was annexed and zoned. So that way we will be able to maintain and monitor and ensure that they continue to comply with those use of that parcel, just as emergency access. And then finally, the Tier 2 rezoning for Bethel Green, which is off of New Bethel Church Road. That was the project in between Magnolia Park and Oak Manor on the south side of New Bethel across from the high school. Yeah. That was also approved on a vote of 3-1. In terms of just moving and shaking in the planning department, personnel-wise, Randy Hogue started this morning. He is our new planning technician, so you'll probably be seeing him occasionally. Going to give him the better part of this week to settle in before we turn things loose in terms of phone and emails and all of that. But very excited to have him on board. The Planner 1 position in Joe's group with Randy, we are looking at our second round interviews next week. So we hope to have a decision on that position by next Friday. The development review manager position, which was a position vacated by Allison when she departed, we are looking to have that person hopefully selected by the second week of December. We've completed first round interviews and working on trying to schedule the in-person, but we have some folks coming from out of state for that, so a little coordination going on. The senior planner position, which was Ashley Harris's old spot, that is being re-advertised. So that is out there now. And Planner 2 in Aaron's group. Aaron, did you have an update on that?
We had interviews, but we will likely go for re-advertisement.
Okay. So may have to re-advertise for that position. So looking hopefully to be up to full staff come January 1st after the holidays. That's our goal as much as we possibly can. So that's all I have for you all today. And if you have any questions for us.
I mentioned at an earlier meeting, it was a question, what would happen to the KS Bank building? Well, it disappeared very quickly at the corner of 7th Ave and Vandora. I mean, it was literally gone within days as I passed by. And they're doing some landscaping work there that it almost appears like it's just going to be left kind of like nice landscaping. Is that your understanding?
Oh, so some of the area, the right of way is fairly wide at that corner because it used to have more of a swooping movement. So there may be some of the landscaping that you see may actually be part of the required development. But their intention is to subdivide the parcel and for there to be another building on the remainder.
Okay.
Yep.
I noticed that they're actually doing something at Bojangles.
Yes.
Yeah, they're moving forward. I know that one's been a while in the making there. They have their tree protection fencing, so I think they're about to begin grading pretty soon here, and they have their temporary construction trailers and whatnot. So, yeah, that's finally moving forward.
Yeah, they have their sediment control fencing up.
Yeah.
As I drive by now, as opposed to when we were considering it, it's not a big parcel. And I'm just curious, there are smaller sized Bojangles. If you're on Cleveland School Road heading towards Smithfield, you will see one. It's kind of small. And I'm wondering if that's what's going in there.
I haven't looked at that level of detail to know if the footprint is smaller than typical.
Yeah, I did review the site plan modification. I don't recall how exactly it would compare to a standard one. The ones that I'm thinking of, I think it's about the same size. I want to say 40 or 50 parking spaces or so.
Really?
You know, landscaping around all of it, and then a small SCM in the back. So it might be bigger than what you see there. Even when I went to the property as well too, and it was bigger than I realized after looking at the site plan. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure.
VA clinic. Do you know when they will turn over the keys?
I know, John, do you have any ideas on that, or David? These guys are a little more tuned into
I'll
the
just say
actual
for a huge construction project that it was, it's kind of pretty if you drive by there.
Yeah, so the last we've heard and what our inspectors have been told, they were shooting for November 20th.
Okay.
There's still a lot to be done.
Which
out there
explains
to
all the
get-
nighttime work and the Klieg lighting
Yes.
and the traffic jams.
Yeah, so they're pushing, they're working on their frontage improvements and stuff out along 50 right now as well. So November 20th is what they're shooting for their temporary, their TCO that they were trying to get.
Yes. There was an accidental water line break that I know did clog things up for a day, because they had to immediately address that. So I know traffic was extra hectic for at least one evening.
And I'll just repeat, the former convenience store gas station on that corner, that's a big lot that they're either going to do nothing with, or whether they have plans to do something with now that they own it.
Yeah. I think there are plans potentially, but nothing submitted or
Okay.
yet.
That's all I have.
Anybody else have anything?
I just want to let know I will not be at the next meeting. I will be sitting at a beach in Mexico, so I'll be thinking of you.
We can vote to have that meeting in Mexico.
I mean, hey,
virtually.
come on in. I'm sure there's space in the sand.
Don't think about it.
Just, I don't know how to follow that, but I'll just give a quick update on our Affordable Housing Task Force meeting of October. We're still working on the definitions required, and we've got some baseline data that we've been looking at, and I'll say it's looking positive for Garner as a percentage of Wake County. And we've got at least, I think, 2 more meetings, and then I think we'll present something to council first of the year. That's not as good as the beach in Mexico, but it's the best I can do.
That's better for the community than what I do. So I'll take it. I'm being excited to hear your presentation on that.
Yeah. Thank you so much for serving on that and giving us all those updates.
I have one question. Do you have like an update as far as like having more greenways in Garner and sidewalks? I know you mentioned that initially it was required to just have it on one side, but as far as like having on 2 sides, I think that's one of the things that's really missing in Garner, just the walkability, and a lot of things are really awkwardly separated.
Yeah, there's that's definitely been a big push in the last 5 to 6 years, I would say, to get our rules in place so that it can be more walkable. But yeah, inevitably that creates situations in the older areas where we as a town need to put attention. And I see John coming up out of the corner of my eye. But that has been a focus of our bond programs over the last couple of issues. So, John, you want to?
I was just going to show the commission members. Good evening, commission members. I'm just going to show you location on the website. If you're not familiar with it, that you can go to under the engineering department. Has our capital improvement program, and that's where you can get an update on all of the projects that we have going on. So to Jeff's point about connecting some older blanks, we've got 3 projects in the last bond referendum, one on Avisboro, one on Bryan Road, and one on Garner Road, where we prioritized filling in connections where there are gaps. And for example, Garner Road is an example where a new housing community built right at the where Vandora Springs tees into Garner Road. They did sidewalks in front of their project, but it left a gap before the sidewalks picked up further down, and that was one of our key areas that we wanted to fill in. So those are 3 of the projects that we're working on right now that are sidewalk connections. And then there's also the greenway projects. There's one primary greenway project that is funded in the current bond referendum, the South Garner Greenway, and this would be a connection from Lake Benson Park on Buffalo Road to the roundabout at Vandora Springs. And so that is how the current dollars that are voter-approved dollars are being allocated for sidewalk and greenway projects. One of our challenges is the 2021 bond referendum that was passed. It was a $69 million bond referendum, but the costs to build are so much more than they were when we did our 2013 bond referendum that our dollars are not going nearly as far as they did in 2013. 2013, we were able to fill in lots of sidewalk missing pieces and make some connections around town. So all the current dollars that voters have approved
that maximizes our borrowing capacity have been allocated, and these are the projects that you see on this page where they're being focused on. Does that help answer your question at all?
Yeah, and then I have one other question, I guess about the Jurgen Park. I noticed that the sidewalk for that park is going down, but it doesn't extend to, I guess, like the downtown area. Is there a certain reason? Because I would imagine that I guess a lot of families would want to be hang out downtown and then hang out downtown and then go to the parks.
There is a development, the village at Garner Station that was approved prior to you joining the Planning Commission is going to be building sidewalk from where our park ends. And they are doing something a little atypical. They're actually voluntarily continuing their sidewalk beyond their frontage and connecting it to the downtown sidewalk or to the sidewalk on Garner Road. So that was one thing that they voluntarily offered to do. We don't often get that. And we cannot compel off-site improvements from a developer, but they can voluntarily do them. So that will fill in from the townhomes that are on Garner Road, plus our park, plus the village, will take you all the way to the sidewalks that are currently on Garner Road. And the signal that the traffic signal that they will install at New Rand Road and Garner Road will allow for a pedestrian a protected signal to cross to get over to Main Street.
Okay, thank you.
All right. And then on Garner, actually that will leave one little gap from the townhomes to Jones Sausage Road. And since we're doing a Jones Sausage Road project, we're including that little gap in our project of Jones Sausage Road. So that should let us get sidewalks all the way down Jones Sausage Road and then all the way to downtown. All right.
Thanks.
Well, before I adjourn, I want to congratulate you, Mr. Hodges, on your ICMA Credential Manager designation.
Thank you very much. I
happy
appreciate
to
that.
see that Garner is doing some great things with our staff. So thank you all for working so hard on our behalf.
Just one quick comment. Yesterday being Veterans Day, I wanted to thank all of our current and former veterans for serving and sacrificing for what they have done, and their families for holding down the fort. And our veterans deserve the utmost respect. And I just wanted to say, a little belated, because our meeting's usually on Monday night, but we wish all our veterans the very best.
Thank you, Mr. Garson. And that is taken from our entire commission. Thank you so much. Well, we will call our meeting adjourned.